Hello, this is Geotech and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Linus Tech Tips Linux Daily Driver Challenge. Primarily, it's going to be testing the gaming experience on Linux, and they're going to be doing this for a month. I think this is a good opportunity to show where Linux is at in terms of gaming, and this is the first video that they released, and I'll be reacting to it.
The utterly paralyzing number of choices you have to make before you even get started. Now, I could just call on industry contacts.
This is a really good point. He does say that choosing a distro could be the first sort of challenge for a new user. And I agree that when you look at reviews or other articles about which Linux distro to use, you may not know what you're getting with each distro, and then it may just cause people to not even bother trying. They want something that's easy, and choosing and researching all kinds of distros and seeing what you're losing or gaining with each distro. Whereas with like Windows or Mac, there's only one distro for each, and it's the same experience for the most part. That's definitely one hurdle there. And it looks like he's going about this like really from like a user perspective. Instead of calling his contacts, he's actually gonna try to just go at it like a new user and do the research.
Friendly and a hassle to set up. Another big one is that customization gets billed as this major selling point.
And then in the video, he goes on to talk about some of the mainstream articles that we know when you go to Google and you just type in top Linux distros, a lot of the first articles a user may see are not actually that good, where the reasons to buy, reasons to avoid are contradictory sometimes. It uses a lot of jargon that may be confusing for a new user.
Spectacularly stupid name, pop !__ OS, topped just about every listicle that I found and legitimately has some compelling selling points, like demystifying the notoriously difficult process of getting my NVIDIA GPU working properly and making installing the apps and tools that I'm going to need to run my Windows games a one-click affair with the Pop Shop. If it was 10 years ago and I was looking for a challenge.
Okay, and so Linus distro of choice initially was Pop! OS, and that's actually the distro I'm using now. It's what I've been daily driving on my Linux workstation for the past year or so. And yes, I think this is a good choice because Pop! OS, it has a more modern kernel and Mesa driver, and there's a NVIDIA version that has up-to-date NVIDIA drivers. And it's got tiling, so that's very useful for multitasking, especially if you're a gamer and do Twitch.
I, on the other hand, after a lot of deliberation, decided to go with the daring
Gonna run with Linux Mint Cinnamon, which is a good choice as it's very stable and very similar to Windows 10.
Oh, wow. Oh, the sensitivity is just so high that I couldn't tell it was there.
And it looks like for the most part, the Pop! OS installation process is fairly straightforward.
1,000 to something more reasonable. That seems more like it. Also, why the hell is this on by default? No obvious indication that any of my hardware is not working fully.
Now, it's unfortunate that Linus ran into this issue with installing Steam. I have ran into an issue before, like years ago with Ubuntu, that sometimes Steam just wouldn't install from like the Ubuntu Software Center. Although I've been reinstalling Pop! OS a couple times this past year, and I haven't ran into an issue with Steam. I know with Steam, there's like two versions. There's the Deb package, but there's also the Flatpak version. I generally avoid the Flatpak version because it seems to run into issues with detecting my external drive. I don't think that's been set up to work right, but I could be wrong on that. So I generally just installed the Deb version, and I haven't ran into this issue at all.
Just install it. No, you do not. This is stupid. Apparently, this is the solution. And I have to type, yes, do as I say in order to install it. And maybe it will install and launch now. What is the point of having a... Oh.
And boom, just like that, the entire OS has crashed. Well, more specifically, the GUI or GUI and desktop has been uninstalled. So you're left with basically just the terminal. And so that is a very really dangerous, destructive bug there. But thankfully with Linux, that they don't really mention in this video is that because of the open source nature of the community here, you can actually just tell the developers, hey, there's a bug here, or open up an issue on GitHub. Whereas on Windows, you kind of just got to wait and you'd really have no direct communication with them. The issue now appears to be fixed, but it's still interesting. I wonder if it's an issue more on like an NVIDIA GPU, but I've uninstalled and reinstalled Pop! OS a few times the past year, and I just haven't ran into an issue installing Steam here. Thankfully, on the Linux Mint side here, seems to be a lot more stable of an experience. So hopefully new users to Linux will see this and kind of understand that Linux is stable.
That, but we are going to try to move to the proprietary NVIDIA 470 driver.
Install done. Just need to restart.
A few more errors than last time, but I think we're still good. Genuinely think this is fine. Yeah, nice. Okay. Now Linux Mint also has an update manager, a new version update.
You know what? No, forget it. The wife's still awake, so I've got Manjaro.
So then this is where Linus goes and tries to install Manjaro with KDE, and this is what he actually ends up using. The one disappointment is that both of those distros or the desktop environments are hideous. Linux Mint, I feel like, has a very ugly theme. Even though it looks very much like Windows 10 in terms of the layout, the theme itself is pretty bland. And I feel like that's like their biggest weakness. And same thing with KDE. I don't know if it's like the theme or even the toolkit. It's just something about it feels ugly to me. There are a lot of very nice distros out there like Zorin or Deepin, or I guess I should say desktop environments that look a lot nicer, that arguably are just as good as Windows or Mac or even nicer looking. And so I feel like this gives people the wrong impression that Linux looks old and inferior. So that's the only one downside here.
Manjaro loaded up here, and we're going to take another crack at this puppy. To be clear, it's entirely possible that I did something completely wrong. Setting situation right now, but this is worse. Hey, is my game controller picked up just like that? Oh, nice. Look at that.
To Steam Play, enable Steam Play for all other titles, and then have, I guess we'll do Proton 6.3-7.
Like native freaking let's go, boys. Oh wait, my sound still isn't working. Yeah, I still have no sound. Honestly, I'm kind of willing to live with that. Let's just it's on the right. And no dice on the controller, even though it was.
Maybe he's running into issues with sound, but otherwise it's running Steam, so that's good.
It's running nice and smooth. This is a native game, so this is really not that much of a challenge. My sound...
And thankfully he ran a native Linux game here, and so he's at least running a game here, which is part of the challenge. I think it's one of the steps or milestones here.
The best part of this whole thing is that we are just getting started. A lot of the games that I want to run, like Supreme Commander Forged Alliance, appear to have ways to run them. Discord looks like there's a way to get it going. It involves a lot of command line. Hopefully I won't brick my OS. But step 2 is getting streaming working. Both Luke and I stream. We both need it working if we're going to run this for a month. So
Okay, so this wraps up the video. For a lot of people, this is their first look at Linux. You know, I would imagine that a lot of his subscribers may not really care or think about Linux. And I feel like for the most part, I think it does give them a little bit more of a negative impression of Linux. Although thankfully, Luke's had a very good, smooth experience. So hopefully people will see that as well. It is a shame because Pop! OS is like a great distro, and I feel like it's going to put off users from trying that one. And then we have to keep in mind that for a lot of people, for the average user that doesn't game on PC, Linux is actually very stable. But when it comes to gaming, that is not quite stable yet, although it really depends on the type of games you're playing. For me, for the most part, I'm able to play all the games I own through Steam Play or Proton or even natively. I'm not too worried about that, but I generally play mostly like the mainstream games that generally have wide support. But if you want to play a different game, maybe an indie game that maybe not have the best support, then that's where you could run into issues. So I would recommend users that are curious about trying Linux to go to protondb.com, compare it with your library and see all the games that you could play already. This is the good resource if you want to give Linux a shot. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think the Linux Daily Driver Challenge is doing more good for Linux or more harm? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like my video, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. If you're enjoying my video, you can subscribe to me on YouTube, PeerTube, follow me on Odyssey. You could also support me on LiberaPay, Patreon, and by shopping at Earth Hero. See links in the description below.